Hello and welcome to Harden, your Microsoft 365 data protection. Today's webinar is sponsored by Rubrik and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this especially timely presentation. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. Let's talk questions. We want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. We won't be able to do a dedicated Q&A session at the end of this one, but we will pass along any questions that you have to the team from Rubrik for follow-up. A Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Okay, next, handouts. In the handouts section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a link to get started with Rubrik or to find out more. There are also some links labeled ATM, which of course stands for Actual Tech Media. One of those is the ATM Decisions Group. That's a panel of IT decision makers you can apply to join to participate in some more in-depth events and other opportunities. Also, there's a link to the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of more upcoming events like this one. So I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Now, I'm sure you noticed the prize icon there. At the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Okay, with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get to today's great discussion. So I'm excited to introduce our speakers today. We have Drew Russell, who's Technical GDM Lead for SaaS and Cloud at Rubrik. We've got Mike Preston, Technical Marketing Architect at Rubrik, Iran Carmel, Principal Product Manager for Rubrik, and Rodney Sharich, who's Senior Partner Technology Strategist at Microsoft. What an all-star lineup we've got here. Drew is going to be sort of the master of ceremonies. So Drew, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Welcome to the session on hardening your Microsoft 365 data protection. My name's Drew. I'm part of our practice focused around all things SaaS and Microsoft 365. Today, I'm joined by a few of the folks that I like to bug on a almost daily basis. We have Rodney from Microsoft, and then we also are being joined from Mike and Iran from Rubrik. Hope talk about some of the new demos we have, some of the new UI capabilities, as well as some of our upcoming roadmap items. So let's jump into what we're going to talk about today from an agenda perspective. First and foremost, we'll review some of the latest and greatest threats that are happening in the 365 world. Feels like at this point, almost every day, we're seeing new and novel attacks across the platform. Really what that comes back to is how popular of a tool it is, right? It's so heavily utilized across the board, quickly becoming one of its most targeted platforms across the globe these days. Then directly in line with that, we'll talk about some of the key questions you can ask in those attack situations. How do I respond to it? What are the industries associated with these attacks? How they play out, different things like that. And then from there, we'll turn it over to Mike and Iran, who will walk us through a demo of the product and then talk about some of the future releases coming right around the pipeline for us. So if we talk about the high level here, what we're really seeing is a new kind of focus around the 365 platform, really from an overall security perspective. And what that comes down to is, almost half of the organizations out there these days are really thinking about the challenges associated with deletion events, compliance events, all the intricacies that we've really kind of, call it mastered from an on-prem world and applying those same concepts to the 365 space. From the specifics in the 365 world, thinking about it from the security perspective, like I talked about, there's just a massive, massive increase in usage across the board. In this case, 74% of security professionals see that increase of data specific around email as a major problem, right? It's so much information moving in and out of the system. It really becomes difficult to wrap your head around. At the same time, 94% of security professionals are really thinking about this from a defense and depth perspective. Going back just a couple of years ago, the reason why you look at a third party like Rubrik is really from a compliance checkbox perspective. But now that landscape has completely changed, where you have to have this traditional defense and def portion of the conversation and apply it to a SaaS platform like 365. One or two kind of quick examples of these threats as they play out, and really kind of what we're seeing from a trend perspective is around what I call the oldies but goodies, right? The traditional kind of attacks we see play out in the on-prem world really being tweaked and modified to be prevalent for the 365 space as well. Really kind of centered around the social engineering and brand impersonation aspect. At the end of the day, it's the identity authentication layers that are controlling your access to it. So the more efforts these threat groups can put into, in essence, tricking us into accessing the 365 subscription in a way that you may not have originally intended, it's kind of how we see the main kind of inroads into the 365 space. From there, it's all about gaining privileged access some form or fashion. A major trend around that is impersonating or adding access to third-party applications, which would grant a large, broad range of access into the 365 space, but by their nature don't have some controls that you would expect from like in a user control aspect, like multi-factor authentication as an example. So really popular target because there's that broad range of access, but not necessarily all these traditional security controls associated with like a user account. Similar fashion, gaining access to your credentials, some form or fashion, whether it is all the way up to the global admin level through things like that social engineering, or even more targeted at an individual user level. It's all about gaining that foothold into the 365 world. They can then lane and expand the overall access into the 365 system. So one of our customers, Payit, actually kind of experienced this in a real world perspective. We have Dan Galvin up here, who is their director of information technology. He had what I would say is one of those situations we all kind of worry about. He sees some kind of outage in his environment. Your first initial thought is something non-malicious. It was a power outage, but then you quickly realize, oh, this is a real-world ransomware attack. We have to respond to this in an adequate fashion. In their particular example, 365 was very, very heavily utilized across the board, just a plethora of data kind of underpinning their day-to-day business applications. So very quickly, it became apparent that they had to worry about not only the 365 aspect, but also all the other disparate services in their environment and being able to respond to those in a cohesive fashion. So really thinking about that from your incident response plan and readiness, how do I prioritize your 365 data? What is my important users? What are my important sites? How does that compare to maybe my on-prem VMware environment, different things like that? All of that goes into your incident response plan here. So in this specific example, Payit was able to recover their environment in less than 24 hours to get their critical systems back up and running, and then completing that entire response plan within a week as part of it. And 365 obviously was a major portion of that for them as well. One of the things we've seen a lot as based off of our ransomware response team internally here is how these attacks play out from a real world perspective. So I always describe it as their inroads into your environment really isn't too different than everything else you've thought of. Your core perimeter is being breached. They're going to gain access to an environment, traverse laterally, and somehow gain access to privileged access. It could be through through those enterprise applications, those third-party applications that we talked about earlier. It could be using the social engineering to gain access to your global administrators, but in essence, they're going to gain that foothold into your environment to use that to kick off the attack as it happened. So one of the most common questions I see is, how does ransomware play out here? How do I encrypt all data in 365? Because it's really hard to do that. So I always like to reframe it in more of a wiper attack, since that's how we see it play out in the real world. They'll first and foremost exfiltrate your data, something like, hey, I'll send up a command and control server to say any email that comes in the system, send it to my Exchange system, or any file that is in OneDrive. How do I exfiltrate that to my file share that I'm controlling? From there, what they'll do is a mass deletion event and then go through and give you that nice ransomware note saying, hey, not only have I deleted all your data, I also have a copy of it. So they're really honing in on this double extortion use case that you kind of see being more and more popularized across the board. So at that point, the question really becomes how to respond to that using the native tools. Hands down, every single customer I talk to mentions the retention policies. It's kind of the default configuration that they have in place. And really kind of what they traditionally have gone to for one-off scenarios. I deleted an email or I deleted a file out of SharePoint. You can go through and use those retention policies to get that data back. The caveat here is these retention policies are then being used to actually attack your environment. So what Microsoft wants to do is give you the ability to delete data from your system. That way you don't have to worry about it from the compliance aspect, the legal aspect. So a great use case that is part of these retention policies. But really what we're seeing is those use cases being used to attack your environment. So instead of saying keep data around for 30 days, these threat actors will modify your existing retention policies and say, hey, do that for a day instead. So what that tells Microsoft to do is delete all data from your environment that is a day or older. Hard deletion event at that place. There's some additional security controls you can put on top of that, things like litigation hold or preservation lock, but also think of these as what they're designed to do, right? They're not these, ransomware prevention tools. They're really more about the compliance aspect. So it's quite literally, a button in the UI that you can use to turn off those litigation holds. So really, they're not really being used to prevent these attacks from playing out. What that ends up translation to is, your only recovery option is being able to pay your data and go through the traditional workflow that you would associate with that. Also really important that before we move on to that aspect to highlight that it's not just your 365 environment being compromised, it's the rest of your cloud environment, your rest of your data center workloads, all simultaneously being breached as part of the system. Before I turn it over to Rodney here, I always like to talk about actually when we first created this slide. We originally titled it as How Does Microsoft Look at Data Security? And from talking to Rodney and some of his colleagues on the Microsoft side, they kind of said, hey, we don't look at it data security. It's viewed in this data management context. And there's some key differences between those two use cases. So Rodney, maybe you could spend a couple of minutes here talking about the kind of high level categories you guys have here for the native tools.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Drew. At Microsoft, we provide a lot of tools for helping you manage your data. One of the first tools you want to invest in and look at is understanding your data landscape. Where do you have your data stored? Are things protected properly? Are they in the cloud or are they on premises? Understanding what data you have and where it is the first step to managing it. After that, you want to make sure that it's well protected. You want to make sure that it's encrypted at rest and in transit. You also want to make sure that the right people have access to the right data and that the data is marked properly so that they understand that. So is this internal only data? Can this be shared externally, etc.? Next, we have several tools that help you prevent data loss. Instead of having to worry about people sharing information, for example, in Teams, typing in credit card numbers or specific customer information that's important not to be shared. We have those also in Exchange and several other places to make sure that data is not overshared internally or externally. And then lastly, you govern the data. You want to make sure that you have retention policies in place, retention labels to understand what needs to be kept for compliance reasons, what is no longer required to be kept or is no longer valuable to the company and can be destroyed and deleted out of the data landscape. And all of this is to help you manage your data, because as part of the Microsoft 365 shared responsibility model, we at Microsoft will make sure that the infrastructure is up, the services are available. We will have multiple copies of your data so that if there's a localized outage or issue, there's redundancy. We'll also make sure the basic security functions and controls are there, making sure that people don't have access to this from external or across tenants. But as part of the shared responsibility model, the customers are responsible for keeping the data safe. We at Microsoft will keep the services up and running. The data is up to the customer. Business data residing in M365 on all of the various platforms, Exchange or OneDrive, Teams, the access controls to those, enterprise backups, data retention, full data ownership lies with the customers, because you know what's important to you. You know what you need to take care of for compliance and regulatory reasons, and make sure to keep safe in the event of an accidental or deliberate disaster. And advanced data security functions with incident responses and remediation is a big piece that Rubrik plays, and we're excited to partner with them to help them answer the customer's portion of the shared responsibility model.
That's absolutely right, Ronnie. I really appreciate you taking a few minutes to review those native tools and really kind of how Microsoft has those fundamentally architected. So when we talk about these worst case scenarios and following an incident response plan, the questions we're hearing from customers really kind of fall into three broad categories. First and foremost, can I recover my data? What happens if these threat groups are specifically targeting those backups? What controls are in place to prevent those from being, deleted in a way that I wasn't expecting? In a similar fashion, what sensitive information was compromised? What regulatory bodies do I need to notify to let them know that this type of information was breached? Or, what of my customer data is being out into these global threat markets these days, and everything that goes into controlling those aspects? And then just at the same time, what is that scope? How do I specifically say this is the data that needs to be recovered, or this is the specific user that has sensitive information compromised? And then once those pieces are answered, what does recovery look like? And more importantly, in the context of 365, how do I do that quickly? And really kind of get into this holistic recovery plan and understand that my environment is back up and running in a way that I would expect, and doing it in a way that's cross-platform, cross-cloud, cross-SaaS, cross on-prem, all kind of in a holistic picture as part of those workflows. And that's really where our data observability suite really comes into play. So this is something that you may be familiar with in more of the on-prem world, but we've extended this to support SaaS products like 365, where the input into it is your time series data that we can then ingest in the Rubrik platform and allow us to take advantage of a machine learning pipeline that provides additional information out there. What sensitive information was compromised? What data had, experience this mass deletion type of attempts? Or if I'm following a more traditional encryption workflow, what specific information is impacted by that, and how do I more surgically recover my data and get my environment back up as quickly as possible? So to kind of walk you through what that looks like from the product standpoint, let me turn it over to Mike, who will demo some of our new capabilities in this space.
Hi there. I'm Mike Preston, a technical marketing architect here at Rubrik. And today, I'm excited to show you some of the data observability enhancements we've made with Microsoft 365. As you may be aware, Rubrik has been enabling organizations to perform ransomware investigation and sensitive data discovery on a number of on-premises workloads. These capabilities are crucial in the event of a cyber attack. Knowing the exact scope of the attack, what files and folders have been affected, along with whether or not these files and folders contain sensitive data, is crucial in both proactively preparing for an attack and responding to and remediating the attack should it happen. We're super excited to extend support for these crucial security services to now include Azure VM workloads as well as the Microsoft 365 SaaS platform. Attacks on M365 data are evolving, and brand new threats are constantly being discovered. Today, I want to give you a peek into just how Rubrik Security Cloud is helping organizations mitigate and respond to attacks on their M365 OneDrive and SharePoint data, using our anomaly detection and sensitive data monitoring and classification services. So let's dive in. We'll start here on our main Rubrik Security Cloud dashboard, where we get an at-a-glance overview of how our environment is performing. We can see just where our data is located, broken down by cloud, SaaS, and data center workloads. We also get a quick peek into what anomalies have been found by our anomaly detection service, along with if any sensitive data has been discovered within our protected workloads. Anomaly detection uses a machine learning model to determine not only file modifications, additions, and deletions, but it also signs for entropy and encryption. And this is now available to scan your M365 data. Let's head into our anomaly detection service and take a peek. Now, as we enter anomaly detection, we can see right away that we have some anomalies that have been identified. We can also see information on how our ransomware investigation pipeline is performing, as well as a nice time series overview of just when any of these anomalies have occurred. Drilling into our investigations, we can see that indeed one of our M365 OneDrive accounts, this Mike Preston account, has been identified as having an anomaly. We can see that a number of files within this account have been added, modified, and deleted, and ultimately a number of files have been marked as suspicious. On top of this, anomaly detection also has predicted the type of ransomware within the account. In this case, we're looking at the lockbit flavor. Now, we can drill into this account and browse through the folder structure, and as we do so, we can see that this is where most of the suspicious files have been detected, with most of them lying within this very small folder. Now, in less than a minute, we have performed one of the most complex processes that needs to take place after a ransomware attack. We've essentially identified the blast radius of the attack. At this point, we could execute a recovery of either the full OneDrive account or a surgical recovery of just those files and folders that have been affected, but often there's more questions that organizations want answers to before we begin recovering. Things like, do any of these exploited files and folders contain sensitive data? What classification of data did they contain? And has any of our customer data been exploited through this attack? Thankfully, Rubrik has the answers to these questions as well. Let's now move into our sensitive data monitoring and classification service. Here's my OneDrive account listed here again in the list, and just like before, we can drill into this folder structure and see where our sensitive data lies within that OneDrive account. In this case, this file shares folder. Here we can see that a number of files within the file shares folder did indeed contain sensitive information. We can see that we have a total of 75 sensitive hits, with the majority of them being flagged as USPII. We can also see the actual individual file names hosting that sensitive data. In this case, it looks as if an Excel spreadsheet containing some personal identifiable information exists within this account. By pointing out the sensitive data within our OneDrive accounts directly after the backups have been completed, customers can take valuable proactive steps to secure their accounts, mitigating the impact of any attacks should they actually occur, ensuring that sensitive data only exists within the OneDrive and SharePoint locations where it should be. And it's not just personally identifiable information that we scan for. As you can see, we have over 50 pre-built analyzers that scan for anything from financial information to credit card data to connection string information. And customers can easily add custom analyzers by defining either regular expressions or dictionary items. So the possibilities here are essentially endless. You simply create a policy containing the analyzers you wish to scan for, assign that policy to a OneDrive account or SharePoint site, and Rubrik will automatically scan each backup as they're taken, reporting to and alerting on any sensitive information found. Anomaly detection and sensitive data monitoring and classification provide key insights to organizations to better understand the scope of an attack, as well as the types of M365 data which has been affected. Without these key data observability features, organizations only increase their risk, both in their time to respond, but also in their time to recover. Enterprises around the globe rely on M365 for its ease of use, and Rubrik complements this, bringing zero trust data protection to protect your M365 data. Fast and efficient data remediation to ensure you can recover quickly, and now scanner-driven data observability to gain valuable insights from your data, both pre and post-attack. Thanks so much for watching.
Awesome. Thanks for walking us through that, Mike. And then actually, maybe we turn it back over to Aran here, who's going to talk about some of our new features and capabilities coming as part of our summer release, really focused around this resilience conversation and how do we ensure that your data is always available in these worst case scenarios.
Thanks, Drew. Well, besides new data observability like sensitive data monitoring and management that you saw in Mike's demo just now, we're also adding more data resilience features to build on what we already have in place. And as a reminder, what we have in place today is, and first of all, it's all about security and ease of use. So we have an air gap, we have immutability with worm storage to help further prevent data modification or deletion. We have retention locks, so no one person can change your SLA or delete the data. We have bring your own key to revoke access from Rubrik in case, for whatever reason, you suspect compromise. We have multi-geo support to help you meet GDPR and data locality regulations. And we have delegated permissions on top of existing RBAC controls to make things easy. In addition to all of these, we're now adding encryption rotation to help reduce your risk of sensitive data compromise, and export to PST to make exporting exchange data even easier. For fast and easy recovery, we're also introducing a new API for Microsoft OneDrive. This helps you streamline restores using PowerShell so that you could restore all users from an AD group at once in a mass recovery scenario. And we have APIs for the rest of the suite coming out shortly to make sure you can restore faster at enterprise scale. And with that, back to you, Drew.
Thanks, Ron. Really appreciate you taking a few minutes to review some of the new features that we're having in the summer release. I know you and the engineering team have been putting in a large amount of effort around that API. I am super excited to get that out into the field. It's personally what I am most looking forward to as part of those summer release features as well. So thanks again for everybody joining the call here. As you hopefully can see, we're doubling and tripling down on our efforts for cybersecurity in the context of 365 and really giving you an easy button to get your environment back up as quickly as possible in these worst case scenarios. If you ever need any additional information, the Rubrik.com site is always updated with our latest and greatest information. Great resource for you to go out and reference for future questions that may come up again. But otherwise, thanks again, and we'll talk to everybody soon.
All right. Well, thanks to Drew, Mike, Iran, and Rodney for putting together a really informative presentation. I'm with Doug, who said he can't wait to see what Rubrik comes up with next. This was really a great session about sort of what's on the roadmap and what's current. This has really been fantastic. And for those of you who did ask questions, we'll make sure the Rubrik team gets those questions so they can follow up with you. And a quick reminder that this is your last chance to grab those handouts before we close the event here in a minute or two. Now, before we wrap up, we do have one more piece of business, and that is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card today is Anthony Dominich from Texas. So congratulations to Anthony. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Rubrik for making this event possible. Thanks as always for attending. That's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.